Hello, this is Christian. Welcome to React. In this video, we'll be looking at React forms. Now, React forms come in two flavors: the controlled component versus the uncontrolled component. In this video, we're just focusing on the controlled component. So here is a diagram. You can pause the video so you can trace through these arrows here, but I can quickly go over that with you first. So in a controlled component, the source of truth or the actual data are maintained in the state of React, of a React component, as you can see here. So you have the state that has two properties, username and email, and those two properties are bound to two input fields in the form, and they are bound to the value property, as you see here. Now they must be bound to the value property like you see here, otherwise this is not a controlled component. And if you don't have it that way, then it's the uncontrolled component, which we do in a separate video. And then once a change has occurred, like in this example here, then you will invoke this function called handleChange, and this handleChange will then receive these events and these values, and these data, whatever attributes you added to this tag, you can access them all through the target property here, and then you can update the state in the handleChange here. Now, once the state has been changed, I put the arrows going this way, but really it should actually go to the state, make the changes, and then the data flows back down here again. So you can see that from the value to this change and go this circle here, you have a two-way data binding. Okay, it's really important that once you bind these properties to the value, you must invoke this change here. If you don't do that, and if you don't update the state, you are not going to see the data being reflected in the form at all. Okay, and this is why the data is being managed or controlled by React. So let's go and take a look what this form is all about. Okay, so I'm just going to do a very simple form, maybe with 3 fields, and to show you how forms are controlled and how do you access those form controls and so on. Okay, so let's go to the code and here. Now, just to make sure your app is running, mine's running already, so I can leave it running and it should reflect on the browser right away. So here I have a component in my app component. I call it forms because I have other app files already, but in the index file, I just basically coming from this one, we call it app so I can render on the browser. Okay, and the class is really called app. And so I have 2 components here. I have a parent component called app, and then I have a child component called add form. And this is what the form actually is. So the main data is contained in the app component, okay, and then the add form component is only where you would do the addition or the add form, right? And so it has its own local state, but the state will just mainly local inside the form, and what it will do is that when you click the submit button in this form, you're going to invoke a function or a handler in the parent component to update the state. So let's look at the parent component here. I have the skeleton set up already, so we're going to go and fill this form in a minute. So I have a constructor with no state yet, and then a return, and then return here a form. I will put a form here. This is the H1 you saw on the browser. Then inside the child component, it looks kind of similar, okay? Similar structure, but all you see here is just the actual form data. So let me just collapse this over here. So I have the form here, 3 fields, 1 for the user, 1 for the game. I'm going to do a maybe like a drop down so you can pick some games, and then the points for that particular game. And then we have a button to submit the final result. Okay. All right. So let's go to the top and start from up here. So I'm going to create my data source. This is the actual data to store my actual data. So initially, you can have an existing data already, otherwise it just be empty, right? So I'm going to put here this state equal. I'm going to have. I'll use this just call it data. Okay, and initially it's going to be just an empty array of data, and I'll push it to this array as I pass more data from the form to this this parent component. And then I'm going to have a function to add the data. Okay, and this is going to be bind to this. So make sure you bind all your forms, your functions here. All right, so that is all I need here. And then I'm going to go right here and create the add function, add data function. What it comes in here is I'm going to have a new data coming from the child component. And once I receive the data, then I need to update the state here, right? So basically I need to push it to this data, to the state here. So to make this work, you have to do as follows. You can say, you need to get a copy of the data first. So I'll put the same name here, is equal to this state data. Now I got my copy, and then I'm going to push it to this data. I'm pushing the new data to this object called data. And then now I have to update, right? So this setState. And then here, you can just set the state data to data. Notice I have the same variable names in here, okay? I have the same name. The local, the red one here is referred to the actual state property. This is just a local variable here. Okay, you can call this whatever you want, data1. If it's data1, then it has to be data1. Okay, the idea is you have to reassign this property. If you're just changing one, property in here and you're not reassigning the whole property, then therefore the state is like it hasn't been touched. That means it's still pure. Because it's pure, it's not going to render the browser, the view. Okay, and that's important. And so because I'm using the same data, if I call it data, it needs to go to data. If it's equal to my actual state property, then the shortcut is you can just omit the second parameter and just do that. And it's exactly the same thing. Okay, so I update the data, and now this part is pretty much done, I think. All right, so now when I pass the data to this function down here, I need to pass in both the add data function. It's a callback function, so you can invoke from the child component. You can pass the data here, and I need to pass the state of this property here as well. So right in here, below the H1, I'm going to go and do the add form, and then I'm going, let's see, yeah, and then I'm going to pass into this child component the add data function. I'll use the same name, add data, and also the actual data too. So I'll just call it data as well. This state data. Okay, so I passed that to the child component, and this one is pretty good. So now let's go into the child component and complete the rest of the code. All right, so the data comes in through these props here, and I'm going to need a single record only for each time when I update the data or add new data, right? So I have my local state in here, and it'll be kind of similar. I'll call it data as well, but this time I'm going to set some default data. Okay, so I have the user is going to be just blank. I have the, what's it called, the game is also blank, and then I have some points. It's also blank. So I could put 0 for points initially. So that is, these are all the fields or the properties of my data. Or I guess you can call this is the shape of my data. All right. This is my initialization, right? Okay, so I need to have two functions in here. One would be to handle the change, and handle change. And then the other one is just to handle the submission. So I'm just going to duplicate that. And this will be the handle submit. And then, okay, so now I need to put them in here so I can implement them. So handle change, and then the handle change is going to receive some events from each of those components. Okay, and then here I have the handle submit. It may not take anything there. Okay, so let's go down here and go to the form first. When I have my user, I'm going to go here and put my input field, one for that and one for the game. I'm going to make this into a select statement, control, okay? So I can do a drop down, and then the points will be kind of like the input as well. So I just want to see what that will look like in my view, see if there's any shows anything there in the view at all. So let's go back and see. Okay, so you can see that now my user is here, my drop down will be here, and then my points here. And then I click submit, and it loads some data. All right, looks good. Okay, so now let's go ahead and complete this form here. Now for this one, I just need, well, basically I just need the, well, let's go in here. Let's make a class first. I'm using forms, so I'm going to make this a form control. Make them look nice. Okay, so that is the class. And I'm going to break this into multiple lines so you can see a little bit better. All right. And this is kind of weird because usually you never see these two tags in HTML. So the class names that you need to get a name for this as well. And the reason why is because, I'll tell you in a minute, because when you do the unchange, you want to grab the name of each of these input. So I'm just using one function to do the update, right? You don't want to create like 3 separate functions for each of these components. You can if you want to, but you don't have to, okay? Because you can grab these attributes. So the name is going to be user. Then you have the value. This is where you bind the data, okay, to this dot state dot data. So you can see it's pretty long, right? Dot user. See, that's pretty long. This data here is referring to this data of here. So what I usually do is you can make it really short by going up here and create a local copy of this data to say this state dot data. And then here you just drop the whole thing, just put data dot user. Much shorter this way. Okay, so it binds to that value, and then so I'm going to show you that if you don't do the update, you're not going to see the data here. Okay, so if I save this and if I go to the form, notice when I type something here for the points, I see the data, but over here I can type whatever I need to type. You don't see any data. Okay, it doesn't mean it's not there. It is there. It is being registered. It's just you don't see it because you're not putting the data back here, so it's not reactive, I guess. That's why when you bind to the value, you have to update the state. And now because it's being controlled by React, this is not. This is not either. Okay, so then I need to do the unchange here. It's going to be bound to this function called this dot handleChange. Okay, so that's it for that one. And then I do the same for this one down here. I'm going to just copy this and put it into the last one, the input here. And this will be a point, so the name would be just points. I'm going to use the same name as the one I put up here in the data, okay? So the user, game, and points. And the reason why I do that is because I'll show you in a minute when I go to event, I'll show you why that's important. Let's go back down here. And for points, I can do some front-end validation. So I could say the type for this one is going to be, a number. You put a number here. You can set the minimum and maximum too. Minimum would be, let's just say 0. That means there's no negative numbers, right? The max is, I don't know, however big you want it to be. And again, this will be have to be strings. So I set my value, my minimum here, the data here. So I can do the same thing for this select statement. But let's complete the rest first. So I have a select statement. Inside here are my options, right? And options are maybe the game tag. I can put here Pac-Man, and then just double a couple times. And this will be maybe Pong. I'm an oldie here. And then this will be Galaga, one of my favorite games back in the old days. And then we'll put here Tetris. Okay, and then your select statement up here will be kind of similar to what you have as here. So we have the class name would be phone control, just to make it look nice. And then I'm going to do this as well, multiple lines, you can see. The next group here will be the name is game. Now, you cannot do this in React. I cannot do like select like that, right? Or select it. You cannot use that property here. It won't work. So to do that, you will have to either choose, well, I mean, it works, but you have to be use the other method. But you can't do it here. To select a default item, you use a default value attribute here. And then this is the same as the value. If you just put value is equal to that, then the first item is going to be the selected, the default one. If you want to pick a particular one, then you put a default value here. Okay, so I want the default value to be, remember, I don't want to put just like Pong like that here, right? I want to get it from the source. So that means coming from data.game. And so I'm going to go into the game and add a default game. Maybe I'll pick one of these, pick Galaga or something. And then same thing on change. You're going to call the function this.handleChange. Okay. So that's that. And let's do one more down the bottom. The button here. This button here, all we need to do is basically tie to a click event. And this is going to be associated with the handle submit. This is for the finale, right? When we're done, we submit that, it would update the parent data. Okay, so now let's go and set the default to Galaga, and I'll set the default here to well, we got 0 already. That's okay, but let's put Galaga down here. And so my data, my game, I'll put here Galaga. Just make sure it matches though. If it doesn't match, it won't show up, then it will just again be the first item. So let's see what it looks like the form now. So here we go. You can see that now Galaga has been selected as the default. If I were to run it now, yeah, this would be the default data, and so on. Okay. So again, here it's not showing. Here is not showing either because both of these are updating in the view, right? So let's go now and implement the unchange. Now this is where the name becomes really important. The name matches these. So these are the keys. So here I can get the names. I can say give me the name and also give me the value from that list, from that single element. And it's going to be coming from the event.target property. Okay. And so the value is the actual value. If you want to get the other attributes, you can. Like all of these, the class names, the any other attribute you have here. Well, not this one, but the class name, the name, IDs, and other attributes. Okay, you can get those data through this method here. Okay, so now we can then get a local copy of this state. So again, I'll say data is equal to this state dot data. That's my local copy. And then now I need to update the data. So data of name. That's what the name comes in. It's going to look for the exact name. It matches one of these. Whichever field I come from, that's why I need to do that. So I can use only one function to do that. Otherwise, you have to create one separate function for each, right? So it's not very, very useful. So I'm just going to change that to the value, assign the new value to that particular field. And then now I need to update the whole property to make it to updatable, right? So I can say this setState, and here again, so I can just data because I'm using the same variable name as my actual one. And so now you see that if I save this and if I go back to my form, I should see the actual data here now. If I put like, me, you see that it's working just a regular form here as well. If I type in numbers, it will let me. If I type in, well, actually this one didn't work. Let's see what happens. Did I type it incorrectly? Yeah, maybe it's a typo. Let's go check it out. So the points, what did I call it? Points, or what did I call it? Yeah, it's called points. Oh, I put data user here. We data points. Yep. Okay, so let's see if that works. Once it works, then yeah, we're good to go here. So numbers are okay, and then I can't put any characters, so we're good. And then next is just we submit this, right? As you can see, I passed some data here. You can see the data already, and we need to update the data and then save it to the parent component. Okay. So now when you do the submit, I need to basically, the first thing you want to do is really you want to validate it, right? So you can write a validation here, write another function to validate, make sure your data are, properly entered. Well, we'll assume that everything's going to be perfect. So in that case, I'm just going to go ahead and submit it to the data. Well, the first thing is you want to, yeah, I'm going to need to get the event too. You want to make sure that, notice when I submit the form over here, let me clear this for you. Right? If I reload this, if I submit the form, you see that the pages reloads. Okay, we don't want that, right? You don't want the page reload because you don't want this data to be invisible. And you want to retain your data because once you reload, everything is gone. So it's stateless. So that means you want to say event.prevent default. You call that so it doesn't load the default way is to reload the page and submit the form. So once that's been set, we can then check for errors usually, right? Once you validate, then typically you put a local flag here somewhere that says error. If the error is false, for example, error might be like initially is false, right? And then once you validate, if one of those has errors, you set it to true. And then down here, before you submit, you want to say if there's no errors, this error. If there's no error, then go ahead and then submit the data. Now to submit it, I'm just going to call the function that was passed to this class, which is this add data from the parent, right? So I will say here this dot props dot add data, pass this new state from my local state, and I add it to the parent, and then I'm done. Else you can put the error message here if you want. Otherwise, yeah, if you do validation, otherwise you won't submit it, right? So that's been done. Now to see the data that we have, because there's no way of knowing that, we need to show it somewhere. So maybe let's go up here and right below the form, and we're going to do an HR here. I'm going to add the data in here, so I use a UL. And then here we'll do a loop to loop through the LIs. So we could say something like, again, the data, this data is too long, so I'm lazy, I'm going to make it really easy down here. So this state data, and then I'll say for each data, okay, I'll do a map, and then I'm going to get in here, I'm going to get both the element and the key. Okay, the key will be, or not key, the index. Let's call it I for index, and then we'll put a function in here. I mean, return some LIs. Return each LIs in here, and the reason why I need the I is because I need to put it in the key here, right? It needs to be unique. And then inside here, I can put some data. Maybe the first thing will be the user. So we put here the e.user, and then we'll put a I don't know, a pipe symbol followed by e.game, and then one more e.points. Okay, so that's my data for each user. And we'll see what that looks like. Let's save this and let's go to the browser and see what happens. So here we go. I put me here, then click submit. So here it is. I have me, and then Galaga, and then I have 0 points. Now if I do you, and you like Pac-Man, you got 56 points. Okay, now you see that this has been duplicated, right? Your, and then so everything changes automatically here. So the previous data was not retained. And this is very tricky, so be very careful here because you're actually passing references to the data above. What I mean is that once you pass the data here in this the child component, once I pass this state, once I pass that to the parent, remember I'm passing a reference, right? Because it's an object. And so when I make changes to the local state here, all those up there will also be changed because it's a reference. So that means once you update that state up there, you need to remove this. You have to reset it back to a new state. Okay, so that means you have to do this whole thing again. So basically, let me just copy this, and after I pass the data to the parent, I need to kill it, right? Kill the local one. So I do another setState, and here is where this one comes in. So you do another reset again locally here to remove the the reference. Okay, you can do that, or you can have it function separately to just say reset, and then it will do the same thing here in the function. But you need to do that to break off that reference. So if I save it now, if I do it again in my browser, and this would be again me, I got 0 points. Okay, so you play a Pac-Man, you got 600 points. So you see that now the data are they stick. Okay, and then they play Tetris and they got lots of points. So there you go. And so this is how data form data works using the control component. Again, just make sure that you do two things. Okay, you bind the value and you perform a change to reflect the data back to the form here. Otherwise, you will not see that in the control. Okay, so if you have any questions, please let me know. Thank you.